This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
All right, Tom Wilson, head football coach at Dowling Catholic. Tom, what is it during the year that notifies you that it's football season?
Well, usually weather gets really warm. This year we've, been very fortunate, but weather gets warm and you start hearing news about school starting and it's time to go. And we're obviously at this time now and looking forward to it.
We got the Iowa State Fair, and of course in Iowa we can't start actual school until the state fair is over with. Here in Des Moines, so I didn't grow up in Des Moines. So the first time I ever went to the state fair, I was like 30 years old. But everybody here, it's like they're almost there every night with the concerts and the food and everything going on. But it also coincides with like the start of football practice. Mm-hmm. So how do you control that with kids, like not eating their weight in Oreos every night at the state fair when you got football going on?
Yeah, it's a challenge. This year we've been practicing from 5 to 8 p.m. for most of the time, and that lessens their time at the Iowa State Fair. But it was probably more of a challenge, to be honest with you, when I was like at Dyke New Hartford, and we'd have people that have, they're showing pigs or showing cattle or whatever, and they're missing practice. Well, we've only got one that does that right now on my team, but I know our kids are getting to the fair and being a part of that, but their time is very limited because we're eating up most of the rest of that time.
Did you ever show up? Were you like a 4-H kid?
I wasn't.
Future farmer of America?
I was a small-town Iowa kid, but that was not in my profile.
Where'd you grow up, Tom?
Monroe, Iowa.
All right. So did you play – was it PCM Monroe?
No, it was just Monroe at that time.
Okay. And who was your coach growing up?
Larry Andrew, who became my father-in-law. And so I played for him all those years. And Coach Andrew was a unique individual. And when I played for him, I never did anything right. And then when he became the grandfather of my kids, they never did anything wrong. So it was a total paradigm shift there. But we lost him, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But I learned a lot, and I wouldn't be in this game without him and his influence on me as a person and influence as a coach. And, there's a lot of Larry Andrews stories around Monroe, but, let's just say I learned a lot of what to do, and sometimes I learned things not to do. So, but it was great playing for him.
Were you dating his daughter while you were playing with him?
Some of the time, yeah. And her brother was one of my best friends, and he was the tailback, and I was the quarterback, and so it was a unique situation.
Yeah, how did that work?
And he was my college roommate to double down on that. So it worked out. 28 years later, we've been married, and it's been a great situation, and as I mentioned, him being the grandfather of our kids, he was awesome. And obviously they miss him, but I was glad that he could influence them as long as he did.
When did Prairie City and Monroe merge?
I think the fire in Monroe was about 1986, 87, right in there, and then that's what got the ball rolling.
So my high school basketball career ended at the hands of Brandon Myers in 2004. So you had Grant Burns was a sophomore on that team, and the Burns family had some good athletes. And Brandon Myers, was he the best athlete from maybe the combined PCM?
Well, I would say, just based on his pedigree of playing football at the University of Iowa, then playing as a tight end in the pros, and he had a great career, and obviously he's so much younger than me. I knew who his dad was, and so, but he had a great career. The Burns family, my brother-in-law is Jason Burns, and so that's how small this world is. But that was a great time, and that team would have been coached by Fred Lawrenson.
Yep.
And way back in the day, I was Fred Lawrenson's bat boy when he first got to Monroe, and then he was my baseball coach. Loved playing for Coach Lawrenson, great man.
Yeah, there was a lot of great teams. And so I went to Fort Dodge, St. Edmund, and kind of my run in the early 2000s and my siblings after that, it seemed like we were running into PCM about all the time with the Grant Burns, Hutch Burns, my era. It was always St. Ed's and PCM in football and in basketball. And those rivalries, especially at a small town, they can really run deep. And that's what kind of makes high school sports fun.
No doubt. And, there's something about a small town like that. Obviously, I've been at Dowling Catholic going on 19 years now, but truly, I'm a small town kid at heart, and that's where I was born and raised. And every other school that I coached at, other than a couple of years at Ball State, and then my time here was in small town Iowa, and so that's something that's very near and dear to my heart.
When did you know you wanted to be a coach?
It was Coach Andrews' influence. He came when I was in the 7th grade, and as I mentioned, Fred Lawrenson had an impact on that as well. But my parents were divorced, and so I was raised with a single mother, and then others, really had a great influence on me. And I mentioned those coaches, but then there's other people in the town of Monroe were probably parents of my friends that I had that were a great influence. And to me, I wanted to try to have a positive impact on other people. And to me, this was the avenue of which to go.
So you started your coaching career, you were at Ball State, and then was it English Valley that you took over right after Ball State?
No, English Valley was actually my first job. I graduated from college in May, and I took over as the head football coach right after that at English Valley.
At 22 years old?
Yep. Actually, I was 21 when I took the job, and then 22 when I coached my first game. Didn't know anything. And Coach Andrews said to me at the time, well, you're going to sink or swim. We'll figure out what you can do, which didn't really elicit a lot of confidence. But, I took over for a guy that had passed away at a fairly young age in the middle of the football season. And, so taking over a program was one thing, and then with those circumstances made it probably more difficult, and he was very much respected at English Valley and had done a good job there. But, when he passed in the middle of the year and assistant coaches had to take over, it was a little bit of a mess. Just finding the equipment was a tall task. And so had 3 years there, loved, starting my career there, great community, very small. Can remember we had to have assistant coaches play free safety if we wanted to scrimmage and things like that. But we were able to build the numbers up. And then I went to Wilton, went east a little bit further and went to Wilton. Really good wrestling baseball school at the time. And I thought, they know how to win in some things, so we should be able to build a football program there. And thought we were doing that. And an opportunity came up to go to Ball State as a grad assistant, and didn't feel I could pass that up. I wanted to get my master's, and being able to get that for nothing other than coaching college football at the time, I thought was too good to pass up. So had got married that summer, and then we took the Ryder truck out to Muncie, Indiana, and spent 2 years there, and then that's when I came back to Dike, New Hartford.
What did you always know you were going to get back into high school coaching, or when you went to Ball State, did you think the collegiate path was for you?
I really didn't think the collegiate path was for me. When you go to be a grad assistant, honestly, you're getting your master's in football, because you don't have time for much else. And ironically enough, I wanted to be a counselor to get my master's in counseling, and if I wanted to do that, I was going to spend more than 2 years there, and I wasn't willing to do that. And so that's when I got my administration in athletics. And so my thought was, our families were back in Iowa. We were Iowa people. As a young coach, I dreamt of winning state championships in the state of Iowa. There wasn't anything about coaching in college that was a dream for me at that point in time, and or building programs in another state wasn't anything that I thought about doing either. But I had the opportunity to be around great coaches at Ball State. We won the Mid-American Conference, played in the Las Vegas Bowl. We had guys off that team drafted. We coached against guys like Mike Allstott at the time, and I got a pretty good taste of it. And I thought the coaches that I coached with there did a phenomenal job of being family guys in Division I football, and I think that's really, really hard to do. I thought those guys were a great example for me, but I wasn't sure that was really the path that I wanted to take. And I can remember having a long conversation with Bill Lynch. He was the head football coach at Ball State, and he took me out just to talk and seeing what I wanted to do with my career. And I just said, well, Coach, I think I just want to go back to the state of Iowa and be an elementary teacher, because that's what I was, and be a head football coach. And he was very supportive. He was awesome. Maybe I would have had some opportunities at the college game, but that's really what I wanted to do. And my wife and I wanted to start a family, and I had such a great relationship with my grandparents growing up because I was near them, and she had the same with hers. And so that's really what we wanted to do, just as a young couple that was ready to start a family, and we thought that was the way to do it. So we came back and had some opportunities at some different places, and, ironically enough, I ended up at Dyke New Hartford.
Yeah, I got to imagine that taking that grad job after you've had a little bit of an experience did kind of give you a leg up on maybe other grad assistants that, hey, just got done with playing. They think they know it all, and they think they can step right in, because that previous coaching experience, you probably are able to apply it better, at least in your head as you're getting it. So how did your football philosophy change from being a head coach to being a grad assistant, then going back and being a young head coach again? Like, how did that grad assistant change your philosophies? Changed immensely, to be honest with you. There was, as I mentioned, the coaches that I got to coach with, Kurt Mallory, whose dad was Bill Mallory, the head coach at Indiana, he was the linebacker coach, and I worked closely with him. I was on the defensive side, and that's one thing that was a key, that I'd always been an offensive guy my entire life, and I was a defensive GA. That helped me grow immensely. But he was a young coach, just out of Michigan, got done playing, and then was a student assistant there, and then he got the job at Ball State. Well, he and I lived in the same apartment complex, became very good friends, and are still very close to this day. And then we had a veteran coach by the name of Ted Huber. And Ted was a longtime Indiana high school coach, Hall of Famer in the state. And he took me under his wing, and I got to work for a guy by the name of Bob Bartolomeo, who was the defensive coordinator, later became the head coach at the University of Indianapolis. Really, those guys influenced me a great deal, and just the overall organization of a program and how you treat people. And Ted Huber was kind of a big, gruff guy, but he was a teddy bear when it came to dealing with his players and the care for his players. Kurt Mallory was a young guy, but you could tell the Bill Mallory influence of the care for his players. And that had a big effect on me. And so, if I wouldn't have taken the GA job at Ball State, my career trajectory would be nothing what it was in comparison to before, and just very fortunate that I was able to be influenced by those guys, of how you treat people, building a program, being around Huber, talking about how he built a Hall of Fame career in the state of Indiana and how he ran his high school programs. And all of my preparation when I was there for those 2 years, obviously I had to do my stuff for Ball State football, but I was also on the side doing things in preparation to come back to the state of Iowa and coach high school football. What was the Dyke New Hartford program like when you took it over? Yeah, it had just recently come together between Dyke and New Hartford. I replaced a guy by the name of Mark Parker, who might be one of the finest people I've ever met in my life. I've told many people this, when you combine two towns, usually if you leave the adults out of it, it'll work out very well. But, there were still,
some hard,
deep-seated.
yeah, there was still some hard feelings about the whole thing. And I think Coach Parker is the one that had to endure most of that. By the time I got there, they just wanted some change and wanted to win. And, Mike Williams was the high school principal there, and will always be indebted to him. He was a former football coach. He believed in the vision that I had for the football program, and kind of let me do my thing. And I was fortunate that we were able to turn things around, and really about the second year there.
Because at that time, when you take over, this is Ed Thomas territory.
Yep.
Applington Parkersburg is just to the west.
Yep.
You had NU High there with Trev Alberts, right before that time, and you're right in the middle. You're right in the middle of that kind of Highway 20 corridor, and you got Dick Ty a little bit farther to the west there. So I'm guessing Dyke New Hartford was taking a beating from some of those programs through the years.
That's correct. And, when I took the job, everybody wanted to talk about AP. And to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons why I took the job, is I thought, okay, Ed Thomas, everybody knows Ed Thomas. Everybody respects Ed Thomas. I just as well see what we can do against the best of the best. And at that time, Denver was a very good program. Osage was a good program. We've mentioned AP. You go Iowa Falls.
Oh, yeah.
It was there was good football in that area, and Hudson was good. It was good for me. I came in and we had some kids that were hungry. Started out, very well and things like that, and then get into the meat of the schedule and take a few lumps. And that kind of set the stage for the next year, where we were state runner-ups during that time. And we were able to beat AP in the second year. And it was a fun time.
When did you know Lane Danielson was pretty special?
First time I laid eyes on him, to be honest with you. Lane, to be honest with you, he's like a son to me, and he and I have gone through, quite a bit together and grown together, but you could see it immediately, and I will say to this day, he's the most competitive kid I've ever had. And, he won the 100 in the state track meet, and do I think he was the fastest guy in the state of Iowa that year? I'm not so sure he was, but his competitiveness is what, helped him be a state champion. And he ends up having, it was kind of remarkable. He's kind of late to the scene from recruiting wise and things like that. But, I had seen guys at Ball State that I thought, Lane Danielson could play at a level like that. And he gets the opportunity to walk on at Iowa State. Mike Woodley did the recruiting, and UNI comes in late. And Lane had already told Mike Woodley that he'd be walking on there. And, I think his redshirt freshman year, he's on scholarship and he's playing, and was one of the all-time leading receivers when he left there.
When did the conversations about moving on from Dyke and coming down to Dowling happen? Because, it's really quite the leap. Mm-hmm. Kind of a small 1A, maybe 1A, 2A school to the largest private school in the state. So a small public school, and you've kind of always been in that small public school to the largest private school in the state. How did that happen?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Well, when I was at Dyke New Hartford, I can't even begin to express how happy I was, because I had a great classroom situation. As an elementary teacher and a head high school football coach, that combination doesn't work in 4A schools, what is now 5A, and I always knew that. And in the back of my mind, I also wanted to be an athletic director at some point in time. Well, athletic directors at 4 or 5A schools aren't head coaches either, and so we felt. All of our family was in central Iowa, my wife and I, and we felt like if we were ever going to make a move, it was going to be, probably to the Des Moines area, at least to central Iowa. Had some really deep talks at one time with Southeast Polk about going there and being a teacher and the head football coach, and that got so deep that I'd taken the job and then decided it wasn't for me at this time. And it was
that's like Bill Belichick to the Jets.
Yeah. I don't feel good about it, but it's one of those things where I wanted everything to be perfect if I was going to leave, and something was telling me it wasn't. And it's nothing against Polk. They've got a great school system and a great program, and they've done some great things. But at that time, it just wasn't meant to be for me. So we stayed 2 or 3 more years, and I get a call from a fan from Dowling whose nephew happened to be part of my football program at Dyke New Hartford. And he said, our job's open, would you be interested? And I said, nah, I said, I think Dowling Catholic's going to find a great coach. I just don't think it's Tom Wilson. And, to be honest with you, I got a couple other phone calls from, others within this community. And I thought, okay, let's just go check it out and see what it's all about. And so I came down and had the initial interview, and by the time I was done with that initial interview, I wanted this job because I thought, it's always had a great tradition. Coach Dillon won 2 state championships here. Jim Williams was the legend here, and guys like Don Morrow and Bob Nizzi were a part of that. And obviously, growing up in Monroe, you hear of Dowling and things like that. But, as I walked the halls here in an interview situation, I thought it was pretty special.
Yeah, what changed your mind?
Jerry Deegan, who was the president here at the time, I thought he was awesome. I really thought he had a vision for the school. The second interview was the toughest, to be honest with you, and that I had Jerry Deegan and Dave Marcoulier, and Marcoulier was an assistant principal at the time. He'd used to coach some football here. They really grilled down philosophically and what it meant to be the head football coach here during that second interview. And by the time I got done with the second interview, I felt like a whipped dog by the time I got out of here, just because we got deep into Dowling Catholic and the program and the history and what my vision for this would be. And, lo and behold, I end up getting offered the job, and we make the move.
What did you want to do to put the Tom Wilson imprint on this program right away? Like, when you're laying out your vision before you get hired here, what did you see here at Dowling that's like, not necessarily I want to change this, but in order for this to be my program, here's what it's got to look like?
Weight room is huge with that, but it's just discipline and accountability. I wanted multi-sport kids that were willing to compete in everything that they did. And, I think a lot of times what made us a little bit different here was I was a small town guy, and, I didn't care if my wide receiver was playing center field for the baseball team. And I felt like as an athletic department that needed to be mended some. And I felt like we could do a great job in player development, just maximizing what we had. But the discipline and the accountability to each other, and, expectations are high here. And I felt my expectations for our student athletes and how they carried themselves, how they worked at their academics. I thought how they go about their business fit what I wanted to do. And a lot of it fit what we were trying to do at Ball State, but now you could mix in the faith component in the overall development of our kids. And I thought it was going to be a great fit. Now, I will say the first couple of months on the job, I kind of thought, what have I done? Just because in any transition, there's going to be rough spots. And I think we had that. And I think you could say we had that, for the first 2 or 3 years, on different occasions. But I think we're able to change the culture of, nothing's going to be given to you. You're going to have to earn everything that you've got. And whether that's your starting position or whether it's what our opponents think of us, we got a lot of work to do.
The first thing you mentioned there was the weight room. And I think people would be shocked if they saw the Dowling weight room. You know, the Dowling weight room is about the size of the Fort Dodge St. Edmund weight room, when in all you ever see on social media now is all these high schools, even small high schools, are getting massive, like college football size weight rooms with 40 yards of turf and everything else. Your guys' weight room is the size of about a classroom. How do you manage having a tiny little weight room, but having a large roster and everybody's got to get work in?
Yeah. I'm hoping that changes, by the way, at some point. But
I didn't know if that was like a badge of honor that you guys, you kind of have to use it as a badge of honor.
When I got here, and that's the new weight room. When I got here, we were behind the bleachers, and you'd get a big basketball game, and you'd have to move the weights and everything out of the way. And I can remember when I interviewed Jerry Deegan, says, "Well, what do you think of the weight room?" And I said, "Well, you want me to be honest?" And I was, and he said, "Well, within 5 years we'll have a different weight room," and we did within 5 years. And they told me how big it was going to be, and they basically said, "Why don't you outfit that the way you see fit?" That wasn't adding on, so I just had to fill with what we had, and was appreciative to have it. And it takes a lot of organization, but the best weight rooms are full ones.
Yep.
And ours are full. Ours is full, and our kids get a lot of work in, and we have a lot of organization to get it done. And it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, and it's not the best looking weight room in the world, but there's a lot of sweat equity in it.
I like that it's got maybe one of the biggest crucifixes you'll ever see outside of a church in there. Yeah. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a weight room with a crucifix that big in it. Yeah,
they took that down from the gym and put it in there. And when they first put it in there, it was, a little bit eerie, to be honest with you, but you get used to it.
Yeah. So I got to imagine, coming from a smaller school, coming to a school the size of Dowling, not like Dowling's the biggest school ever, but you guys compete at the highest level, 4A, 5A. Building out a coaching staff, like, how did you know how to structure a coaching staff of that size and the demands that you have here, where there's less guys playing both ways? So not only do you need offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, but you need the assistants, you need the weight guys, you need, like, for lack of a better term, the lackeys on the coaching staff to drill down on the positions too, because you're running your football program a lot like a college team runs, with 1/1000th of the resources. How did you have the foresight of how to build out that coaching staff coming from Dyke?
Great question. To be honest with you, that was part of the interview process. I just wanted to be able to name the coaches that I had available to me. I wanted to be able to decide what's going to happen with the staff. I wasn't going to guarantee anybody a job. As we came in, I interviewed everybody first who was on staff. And then, then you try to figure out, okay, who are possible people that you can bring in? And it's really not that simple. If you're going to bring people in, some of them may need teaching jobs. If they don't need teaching jobs, they must be in the area. And so as I put the staff together, I didn't keep everybody, right, wrong, or indifferent. I didn't. I wanted to, kind of the people that I felt like I was going to mix with the best, and took some chances along the way, to be honest with you. Andy Pollock came with me. Andy Pollock, ironically enough, I coached against him when I was at Dyke New Hartford, and he was an offensive lineman at Applington Parkersburg. And that came out of a conversation between Ed Thomas and myself. And I said, I need to find offensive line guys. I was probably one of the best things I've ever done was hire Jim Williams to be an assistant coach. And I kind of conned him into that over dinner, talking about the Catholic Football League, which was my intent. But as everything got us talking about everything, I just kind of slipped it in towards the end of whether he'd be interested in coaching the offensive line. And that extended our dinner for about an hour. And then a couple days later, I had an offensive line coach. So I had a small staff to begin with. And I can remember having a conversation with Steve Shanks, who was our new AD at the time, and very concerned. And he kind of talked me off the ledge. He goes, "Tom, it's going to take you time to build the staff that you want. Grant Bosson became our defensive coordinator, and I don't know if he was 25 at the time, but he had some older mentors that could help him out on that side. And I was the head coach, coaching the running backs, coaching the linebackers, and running the special teams, and that's the kind of stuff I did at Dyke New Hartford. So the small town stuff probably helped me more than hurt me, but now our staff is fairly large, and we've got people that have been together for quite some time.
What was the first big win at Dowling where you thought things are clicking? We're getting buy-in from top to bottom, and this is now resembling the program I hoped it would be.
Yeah. Ironically, the first time I think it probably came after 2 losses to Valley. And then, it was like my second game as the coach here. Valley comes out and, they're probably up on us by 2 or 3 touchdowns, and we battle back with a chance to take the lead and get beat at the end. And that same year, they beat us in the state semifinals to where we could have won that ball game. But then it was the next year which we beat them that I thought, okay, we've arrived a little bit. Now we'll see what we can do. And that was end up being 2006, and it wasn't until 2010 before we won our first championship. And honestly, in 2009, we got beat in the state semifinals. That's one of my best football teams.
Outside of talent, and you've had an array of talent that has come through here. Guys, a lot of Division I guys, NFL guys, you've had talent. But you take talent out of it. What's the most important factor to winning football outside of talent?
I think it's relationships. Our kids, I hope, they know we care about them. It's not just Tom Wilson. I can't do this myself. It's our coaches. And, I think, to give you an example, Adam Jack, who is now our defensive coordinator, he's been my linebacker coach and strength coach for a lot of years now. He got the job here on passion. You talk to him and he gets emotional just talking about kids and making them better. And I didn't care what he knew about football once I saw his passion. And the passion that it takes to influence kids. And, do we lose some kids along the way? Are there some kids that we don't get to? Do people agree with everything that we do all the time? No. It's not easy to coach in 2023. But it's built on those relationships, that passion. Our kids work, and we hold them accountable to that standard.
7 in a row. You guys won 7 in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and again, you might see in some sport, some school get a run, right? Like, what's the little town northeast of like Cedar Falls in volleyball, right? Like they've had good run over there, or like Iowa City Regina in football, or Mason City Newman in baseball. I don't know if I've ever seen somebody win 7 in a row, and especially in the most prominent sport, in the most prominent league. Looking back on that run now, like, how often do you have to pinch yourself about that run?
I haven't taken much time. I suppose when I give this up, I'll probably think about it, because you're really always worried about next year's team. That run really started with a group of kids. A lot of times people forget about that 2010 team, which was a phenomenal team. And then, the run that started in 2013, we had kids like Ryan Boyle, Nick Wilson, Max Moore. I mean, we had some players and good football players. And, Boyle was the quarterback of 2 of those, and, Nick Wilson and the names that I mentioned. And there's so many kids in there that I can't mention, or we don't have time to mention, but it's that was a special group. And then it just permeated throughout our Catholic Football League and our program, and nobody wanted to be the team that lost one. And there's times and teams where I didn't think we were the most talented. You look at 2019 where, we beat Bettendorf in like 4 overtimes, and we were down like 14-17 nothing in that ball game, and come back and win. And then we got Jack Campbell the next game, and at Cedar Falls, who I thought he was phenomenal before we played him. He was even more phenomenal after. And we somehow beat them at the end. And I don't think that team was more talented than the 2 teams that we beat in the semis or the championship, but they had a will to win, and it was important to them.
There's something about momentum in sports, and especially when you got a good run going, where those teams don't seem to crumble in the big moments because they've been there before. And when you have it year over year, you have the sophomores that are learning from the juniors or learning from the seniors. And so, but when the merry-go-round stops and you get beat, and you got to get back to the top, because it's been 3 years now since you guys have won it, and you've had great teams every year. But how hard is it to get back after you've been there?
Well, it is, and it was hard to stay on top. I mean, irregardless of 7, very few of those times were we undefeated in those years.
Right.
The year that we beat Bettendorf and Cedar Falls, we had 2 or 3 losses that year. In one of those championships, we beat a Valley team in the state championship that was a great football team, and they had beaten us, earlier in the year. You look at the last few years, we've been in the state semifinals, 2 of those, and the other time in the quarterfinals, and that is the year that we had lost a Division I quarterback the first game of the year, and so. There's a lot of factors there, but I think you have to give the competition a lot of credit too. Southeast Polk has done a great job. When we play Valley, anything can happen. Ankeny has done a great job. And then you've got, teams like Waukee Northwest, who is a good program. Johnston, they've got great talent right now. Waukee's going to be knocking on the door at any minute. So there's plenty of good competition around, and I think that just makes things even more remarkable as you start looking at the type of talent that we're facing each and every week.
I'm looking at your wall here, and you got a plaque up there called the Wilsons, and so in 2016 there, your son was the quarterback of a state championship team. What was it like? What was the challenge with coaching your son when he is taking over as quarterback, like right in the middle of the run, right? So you've already got 3 under your belt, and now your son's taking over. And I got to imagine there's a little bit more pressure that comes with it, not only for him, but for you. And then there's the challenge of the relationship with your son that goes along with that. What was that experience like for you?
In hindsight, it was awesome. During the time, Ben wasn't a Division I quarterback. He was, a kid that had a dream. The biggest thing that he had to prove was he was the best quarterback for us at that time. And being the coach's kid can't be easy. He had to try out. We were trying out, see who was the best, and it was probably a couple of our players that came to me and said, hey, Ben's the quarterback. Let's just get this thing going. And he had a lot of talent around him. And fortunately for him, he played his best in our biggest games. And it's like I told him, hey, why don't you throw the ball up to Jack Kerner? Things usually
There's an idea.
Things usually work out pretty well. And I can remember, a big play in the Dome where it was on 3rd down and he threw it up to Jack Kerner. But we had a really good defense. We had 2 really good running backs, a good offensive line, and Ben managed the team. And it meant a ton to us. You mentioned the pressure and things like that. To be honest with you, after it was done, I couldn't hold myself together. And it was really the next morning, just because of the pressure, and you want what's best for your team. And obviously, if you're a father, you want what's best for your son, but you have to also do it in the manner that's fair to everybody. And, there comes a lot with that. And again, people may not always agree with everything that you do, but for us, it was the best.
You mentioned Jack Campbell. Who's the best player you've ever coached against?
Jack Campbell and Aaron Campman.
Oh, Campman.
Campman was at
was that right at the start of your Dyke run?
Yeah. It was the first year I was at Dyke New Hartford, and Aaron Campman was playing their Mike linebacker. He wasn't a defensive end yet, and we blocked him one time in that ball game, and I think the rest of the time he made every tackle, and that's similar to the way Campbell was.
Did he? I'm assuming he was like the running back too.
No, he played offensive line. He played offensive line for him, and he was playing linebacker, and he was a stud.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then you had the Sama kid from Southeast Polk. I mean, he's maybe the most electric player. I shouldn't say that. I have to go back and think about it, but he was phenomenal.
Phenomenal. I thought they used him really, really smart because he played as needed on defense. They were fortunate to have another running back that was good both of his years at the varsity level. And so he didn't carry the load, and then they let him take off in the dome, and he's a fantastic athlete. And I can remember Iowa State asking me about him, and I said, "Yeah, I don't know what position he plays, but you can find a spot for him somewhere." Yeah. He's a good player, and by all accounts, seems like a great kid.
What's ahead for this year's team?
I like our team. We're defensively, we're going to be really young. I would say there's going to be at least 3 sophomores that'll play significant minutes on the defensive line, which is, you can get educated in a hurry there. But we think we can put together a good defense, and offensively, we'll see. Dante Cataldo has experience at quarterback. Rashad Davis has played a lot of football for us and is only going to be a junior, and Hank Brown has kind of been waiting in the wings to be the main wide receiver, and we've got him. We've got my youngest son, Trey, Trig Troyer, Curtis Horace, and by the way, we have another Kerner. So I think those kids, from a skill position standpoint, should do a good job. And honestly, it comes down to tight end play and offensive line play of how far we can possibly go.
Well, Coach, good luck this year to the Maroons.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on the pod, and it's good to chat.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. You download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.